Have you ever wondered why the photos you take look hardly anything like what you saw? And how photos from certain eras have such a distinct look to them, it's almost like the world was actually a different place at the time it was taken. That's not just nostalgia, you're not remembering things differently. The cameras and the technology we use to capture photos changed the aesthetic without us even doing anything. It's the film, the sensors, the lenses, the software, all of that changes how a photograph looks. And the more I look into why photographs from my childhood feel different, like actually feel different than the photos I take of my children today, the more I saw and I realized that we just went through a massive shift in recent years in how photographs are taken and how they look and how memories are shared. And we may never go back. In the over 100 years of film photography development, different looks were the result of a variety of factors: new and improved emulsions, different development processes, and then the development of color film and that color technology. And it's no coincidence that a photograph taken from the 70s looks different than a photograph taken from the 90s, even if it was taken on exactly the same camera and lens. Not only are the hairstyles different and the objects, but the actual medium it was recorded on changes the way it looks. Okay, so here's the film that I have in my fridge, past the food and stuff. Over the years, hundreds of different types of film emulsions and stocks were created from just a bunch of different brands. Here I have a bunch here. Got some from China, got some from Kodak. I have some film that's expired. I have some that maybe isn't even made anymore. And each of these has its own aesthetic signature from the time it was produced, baked into the film. You just take the picture and that comes with it. And then there's some process that goes on when it was developed, and that has some interpretation as well. But what about digital? And things should be different now, right? Because there's no different emulsions, there's no development process, there's no chemical difference between the cameras as we take photons and turn them into electric signals and interpret color, right? Like we should all decide on, every photo should look basically the same. Digital sensors, like film, have some subjectivity, not so much in the sensor itself, but in the processing that happens afterwards. Even in the early days of digital photography, camera companies had to decide how an image should look. This is why certain brands have a reputation for their color science, or how the image looks straight out of the camera. But then things got really weird when phone photography entered the picture. The first cameras and phones were reminiscent of digital point and shoots, albeit a bit worse with smaller sensors and optics. But around 2010, phone cameras began to advance rapidly, and not necessarily because they were out to get big professional cameras, but because the reason we took photos and what we did with them was about to change forever. Photo sharing sites have existed since the dawn of the World Wide Web. But the first photo sharing site dedicated to smartphone photography was Instagram, releasing to iPhones in 2010, the same year that the iPhone 4 came out. And Instagram changed everything. This was an inflection point in digital photography, and it was several major forces coming together all at the same time. For one, smartphones were here to take over photography. If we look at a graph showing worldwide camera sales, we can see it peak in 2010 with a sharp decline afterwards. Smartphones didn't just have cameras, they were cameras, and the ones the majority of people were now going to choose to buy. And a big reason people were using smartphones over cameras for photography was a second major force, which was that social media was set to change the way we take and view images. This is still pre-algorithmic feeds, but it's laying the foundation of what we know today. Just think, for the majority of people, why they actually take a picture. It's probably to put on social media, inspired off of some trend or something. And third, digital photography was now entering its cringy filter phase. And I didn't think it was that bad, but then I looked back at old Instagram and it was bad. Digital filters weren't just a gimmicky feature, they were how you edited and shared photos and expected to see them. A study of over 7 million photos on Instagram and Flickr in 2015 found that photos manipulated with these filters received more likes and more comments than those without. And we as individuals don't need a study to know that. We just see more likes, more hearts on our posts, and we want to follow. Me like likes. So Instagram was full of filters, but smartphone photographies at the time still took pretty clean images. There was basic processing that the cameras used to decide color. There were some HDR tools. They were limited. They're nothing like what was to come later. And this is important. The filter effects were added after the photo was taken by choice, either with a camera setting or a little editing app like Instagram. And importantly, Instagram was only designed to allow photos taken on a smartphone. And this was an intentional design choice. The co-founder of Instagram wrote, Our focus on building out a mobile-only experience is a unique path that we've chosen for many reasons. The most important of which is that Instagram at its core is about seeing and taking pictures on the go. It's about producing photos on the go in real world in real time. However, that didn't stop professional photographers from taking photos on their nice expensive DSLRs, editing them in a professional software like Photoshop, and then figuring out a way to upload it to the app. And this was slow going, it was a slow buildup, but we went from the cringy filter phase to the professional photos taken on DSLRs phase, and the incentive structure was the same. More likes, more comments, more hearts, double click. And now there was a gap. The phones could do the filter stuff, but they couldn't do the really nice images stuff that the professional photographers were doing, but that was what was getting the attention. But meanwhile, smartphone companies were taking notice of this and starting to create technologies to match these new user expectations. In 2011, a professor of computer science at Stanford began working with a Google division focused on cameras and photography. Their first project was to create HDR photos processed automatically by a computer by taking a burst of images in quick succession and then stacking those images for combined pixel information. That little project is what came to Google Nexus and Pixel phones in their early generations and won tons of awards for its wonderful HDR imagery with just a single click of a button. That same team at Google then tackled another smartphone image problem that made smartphone images look different than professional DSLR images, and that was blurry backgrounds. Large sensor cameras can naturally produce blurry out of focus backgrounds because of the physics of light. But they developed something they called synthetic shallow depth of field, or what we know today as portrait mode. Social platforms were now rewarding polished, professional-looking images, and phone makers responded, not just with more megapixels and lenses, but with smarter software. There's a feedback loop here. People are taking pictures of what they know will perform well. They are only posting what they know will perform well. Social media platforms are sharing, promoting what performs well, and phone camera makers are optimizing for that. And over time, the camera has become less of a tool to capture what you see and more for capturing attention. I hope you see the connection here. Remember the 2010 Instagram filter photo? That was not reality. And this is not reality either, I guess, but it's much closer to it. This is now a modern smartphone rendition of the scene without any cringy filter. Is that closer or further from reality? And so there's a fundamental difference between my 2010 smartphone and my modern smartphone. In my old smartphone, I take a picture and then I later decide if it should have a filter on it and how it should look. But in my modern smartphone, I take a picture and it does its AI, its image enhancement, its algorithms, machine learning. I didn't ask for detail in every shadow. I just wanted a picture of my kid the way I saw it. The next decade of smartphone photography mixed with whatever social media is at the time and who knows where AI is going at that time, is going to shape another generation of visual style. And as weird as it sounds, at some point that will be normal and we'll look back and think, remember how cool everything looked back in the 2020s? But for now, you'll catch me shooting on old cameras where I feel like I can choose more what the image is going to look like the way I see it. Shoot with whatever you want, have fun with photography, and until next time, happy snapping.